Alright, let's go into Let Him Go, which undoubtedly will probably be your grandparents' favorite movie of the year, if I had to guess. Well, that sounds a bit, like, derogatory. It really, actually is much better than I was expecting it to be, because it kind of looked like... It almost kind of had a straight-to-video look to it, as far as, like, the advertising and the poster, if it weren't for the fact that the faces on the poster just happened to be Kevin Costner and Diane Lane. And of course he's playing a retired sheriff, and of course they're going to find themselves as these people that have had this tragedy in their life that is told, that is shown to us actually, really skillfully. Like, I was really surprised talking about how it kind of had an almost, like, if you just look at the poster, it almost has a straight-to-video vibe. It's a director that's coming from a really weird place. Because if you were to see the movie and actually see, like, the way it's shot and the way the story is told, especially in the first half, you would think that it's like this really sort of seasoned veteran director, because they seem to have such a confidence in the material and the minimal way they're telling the story. So I had to look him up because I didn't recognize his name, and I have seen a couple of his movies. This skillfully told story with this sort of minimal dialogue opening that tells this really tragic story between this couple, this old married couple, and their son, their grown son, and his wife, and their new child. And how this results in a tragedy that ends up killing the son in a horse riding accident, is from the director of The Family Stone and Monte Carlo, that Selena Gomez bullshit. So that was not what I was expecting when I looked the guy up. But that's, and you think about those things, and it's like when you probably kind of get this, if you've seen it, you probably get this vibe when I just kind of say what happens in these opening scenes. I was getting some serious in the bedroom vibes from this movie, at least at the start, and the setup to the story. Which is also interesting since Todd Field, who directed In the Bedroom, I think his only other movie is Little Children, so it's like it's the way these stories can be told by these directors that don't have a vast filmography, or it almost feels unexpected, because Todd Field's known for being an actor, and this director's known for those movies. But yeah, just in these moments with hardly any dialogue at all, and especially through the performances of Costner and Lane, you can, like, really feel the loss, and there's something so, like melancholic in as far as these opening scenes go, and the way it kind of toys with your expectations a bit as it goes from scene to scene, especially since it's not using dialogue and it's kind of just showing you gradually. Like, there's a moment when it's shortly after the son has died, like in the opening scenes, and then we get these scenes of them just quietly getting dressed in the bedroom, and it's like formal attire, and it's like you immediately assume it's a funeral, but it's a wedding. And just little visual touches like that, that kind of tell the story in this really interesting way, but also in, like, kind of not taking you in the direction you are immediately expecting. But what's interesting is the direction the story's going is that this wedding they're attending is pretty much just as somber as a funeral you'd be attending, because their former daughter-in-law, the wife of the son that's just died, is now getting remarried to this pretty unsavory dude. We don't really get much of a vibe of him at the wedding, but we get, like, this sort of unspoken coldness. Like, there's just something not right about this. And then there is a turning point where we see this guy's true nature. And once again, in the movie's fashion, this isn't, like, really big and dramatic. It's Diane Lane sees something happen from a distance, and that's how it's played up. That's, like, the big turning point where this movie goes from one thing to what it ends up being. And that, of course, being that this grandchild of theirs is the only thing they have left of their son, so they have to get him out of this dangerous family that this new husband is a part of, which features our head villain, who is unexpectedly Leslie Manville, which I didn't know going into this, so that was surprising, and Jeffrey Donovan. There's others, but those are kind of the two seemingly kind of heads of the family, it seems. Though Jeffrey Donovan's kind of the one that's, like, there's something off about him where like he doesn't seem like he's all there as far as like brains go, but he seems very much potentially dangerous, and there's a lot of tension building up to that where he's kind of the first kind of family member they meet outside of this guy, and as they go on, it kind of turns into this journey for a bit before they get there. That's also kind of the movie kind of doing the kind of showing the how much faith it has in the patience of the audience up to this point. And we get more sort of subtle clues here and there about the marriage between Costner and Lane and how he's clearly got a drinking problem, but like I said, a lot of these things that are otherwise pretty dramatic aren't really played up as such. And you kind of just get the kind of watch the pieces fall into place and see how these characters work without a lot of really overdone exposition or anything like that, which is really refreshing. And then we get some really quiet moments where once again there's just sort of this unspoken thing about all of the tragedy that's led up to this point, and like I said, that sort of loss that they have. And there's a moment when as they're on their journey to get the grandson back from Leslie Manville's family, she says to him, do you want him back? Like, because you haven't said that yet. You haven't said the words out loud that you want him back. And what's interesting is, in this moment, my mind kind of went in another direction, and I was assuming she meant their son. Wanting him back after he has died. And then it only occurred to me as the conversation went on, oh, she was talking about the grandson, of course, because that's what they're, on their way to do. But the way there's just kind of that instantaneous double meaning is especially interesting since the title of the movie seems very, vague or very generic, but the title of the movie ends up having, 4 different meanings by the end of this. And so I thought that was really interesting how that plays out, and a lot of the stuff that seems like it might be generic on the surface has more to it the more the story kind of unravels and the characters kind of unravel a little bit. Then we eventually get to it pretty quickly. Once they get to Leslie Manville's house, it goes into thriller territory, and that's what the larger fraction of the movie is, where we get this. Before we get to the dinner scene where the tension really ramps up, and it's kind of like the centerpiece of the movie, we have this meeting with Jeffrey Donovan, who's going to take them out to the house, and it's really you get this immediate discomfort with him, because especially with the way he and Costner interact, because where Diane Lane kind of has that quality to her where it's like she'll go along with whatever, she just needs to get the grandson in her arms and leave, whatever that takes. But Costner's obviously got this bit of, there seems to be a bit more of a hostility in him, but like that quiet Costner hostility, not something like really straightforward. And that's the thing is, it's like all 3 characters here interacting, Costner, Lane, and Jeffrey Donovan, there's a straightforwardness, but they're also dancing around it at the same time, and it's kind of a back and forth between whether they're sort of, they seem really comfortable being curt towards each other, but they're also trying really hard to not raise the tension enough than it already is. Where it's and it's the way Jeffrey Donovan remains having this friendly facade, even though it's so abundantly clear that he's probably not trustworthy, but they just they have no choice but to go along with it if they want to get to their grandson. This guy is the only way to get from point A to point B. And then the question becomes, what is it going to be? How much is this feeling going to amplify once they get down there and they're surrounded by this family that Jeffrey Donovan comes from, or the shady new husband comes from? And it kind of goes back and forth from there, where it's they seem kind of passive and they're trying to avoid confrontation, but push is always coming to shove very quickly as this escalates, especially once we've met Manville's character, and it's this is the point where, because we were talking about how everything's super downplayed and everything's super subtle, and everything that Costner and Lane is doing is almost through no words, only emotion or just quiet, emotion or whatever. And Leslie Manville comes into this movie going super over the top and super theatrical. But it's clearly an intentional contrast. And it's like the way you can see this isn't the world they belong in by any means whatsoever. When the movie gets from quiet to theatrical, and I think that's a really good way to kind of visually show that they're pretty much out of their element at this point. And the more showy and theatrical the performances of the family are going to get, the more the tension is going to rise, and this might end in a surprising amount of bloodshed for the way this movie starts. So there's because that's inevitable, of course, with a story like this. But but there's also side characters like the mother of the child, their former daughter-in-law, and it's a case where you're not always sure which characters you're rooting for when it comes to those. Well, I say characters, it's really just this specific character because she's clearly in this position, like she's trapped in this position regardless, but it also seems like sort of like the attitude she has towards them when she sees them later on away from the family. It's like it's hard to tell if this is just all the directions like that she's gone down with this family, and if it's like are they rubbing off on her in a negative way, and is she becoming hostile also, and it's like can they this is another obstacle in regards to getting the grandchild back, or at least away from the family. Um, but then we see, like, it says a lot about the characters, I think, that the more she's around Costner and Lane, the more she kind of returns to what seemed to be her former self when she was with their son. Despite the fact that there is, like, hints at tension between her and Lane even before anything happened, like, even before the movie started. But there's definitely, you get a sense of the contrast of the way she is with them versus the way she is with the other family. And all of this, like all of these elements, are just going to be ramping up the tension for the third act and where all of that goes, and it eventually is just going to escalate and escalate and escalate and escalate, which does obviously, as I was saying, goes down some pretty inevitable directions. Like you'll be able to, like nothing. There's individual acts throughout the middle portion and then the end that will probably be unexpected, just as far as like how far they go. But like overall, as far as like the story arc, it's very obvious to see where everything's going. But that doesn't stop it from having plenty of tension, which it has pretty much throughout. And it's like there is like an unexpected power to this movie that's sort of for a movie that seemed like really throwaway and forgettable kind of on the surface. Like if you see the poster or you just hear the plot, and it's like, and it goes in predictable directions or whatever, or you can see it coming as soon as you know the setup or whatever. But it's really kind of the journey there and seeing how they ramp up these tensions and some of the sort of unexpected individual moments they throw into it. And most specifically the performances by Costner and Lane, and then just the whole contrast of what Manville's doing and what Jeffrey Donovan's doing to go against that. You can tell it seems like Manville really seemed to love playing a part like this, and it probably was inevitable that she would eventually get a part this flashy in a movie like this. But the unexpected part of that is the fact that the entire first half of the movie is so like subdued and quiet about itself, and is so. Like I said, I just love the confidence in the way this movie tells its story. So, yeah, so I was really into this pretty much through the whole thing. There is another side character that helps out Costner and Lane here and there that ultimately feels kind of pointless in the long run, especially since the movie's near 2 hours. And it's probably scenes that don't necessarily belong, but it is kind of a bit of a thing in regards to that. There's more revealed about Lane's character throughout it that kind of shows more of where she's coming from as she goes into this. And it's another sort of variation you could take the title in also. So, yeah, so there was a lot more to this than I thought there would be. So, but yes, I still stand by the fact that it probably will be your grandparents' favorite movie of the year. But it's probably a little more than one would expect when you look at it from that perspective. But that's pretty much what this is. So we're going to go and continue on. I was trying to remember what some of the other big reviews coming up were going to be. The one I was clearly forgetting was Tenet, which I will probably talk about when like the Blu-ray comes out next in like at some point. December 15th, I think is what it is. So, yeah, so we'll have that then, and all the other stuff, and, Fincher's movie and all that stuff. So, until all that other stuff, I think that's it.